So I want to start off talking about Disney World. My dad, who's in the row right here, really fostered a love of Disney World in my life as a young child. And I went to Disney World as a toddler like 3 or 4. And so I have these faint memories of what it was like to be there, to experience the magic and the sensations of Disney World. And so throughout my life, I had these stories I was told, these pictures I had seen. In 4th grade, I was told, you're going back to Disney World. And I was like, yes, Disney World. You know, you've seen the videos online of kids like crying. That was probably me. And our family was like so lame that we even got matching t-shirts that all had a different Disney character on the back. I think mine was Eeyore. Dad, can you confirm?
Can't remember.
I don't know. I think I was Eeyore, which is like not me at all. But so we had these matching t-shirts, and everyone was getting excited, thinking about this day coming up, and I had this faintest memory of what Disney World was in my mind. I had this small remembrance of this beautiful, magical place that had Tinkerbell that flew across the sky. And so I wanted to go. I wanted to go bad. And I had this longing and this yearning to be at Disney World, and every single day leading up to it, I was like, holy smokes, it's coming. And so I know that a lot of you may not actually like understand that because you're like, Disney World, whatever. But we all have these intense longings inside of us. Especially as college students, you sit in a class and you're working on an accounting spreadsheet and you're like, man, this is my future. I have this thing ahead of me, and maybe that's not exciting for you, but you have these moments where you see the future ahead of you. Whether you started a new relationship that you're interested in making into a family of 4 with a minivan and soccer practice, or you have these adventures ahead of you that you're going to be participating in because of what you're doing right now. But we have these intense longings for a future world that we can kind of glimpse, but that we cannot see in full and that we cannot comprehend in full. And so the German term for this feeling is Sehnsucht. And I butchered that. I'm not German. Well, actually, my heritage might be, but I don't speak German. But Sehnsucht is a word that describes a deep longing. It's an emotional state. It's intense, and it's yearning for something that we cannot even comprehend, which is kind of a weird thing to like talk about today, right? It's something that's unidentifiable to us, but that we have in our soul. We know that something is there. We don't know what it is, but we have this pulling for it. And so, like my small desire for Disney World, where I had this faint idea and I had this pull to it, Sehnsucht really infects our lives in every aspect in our souls. And so C.S. Lewis, in The Weight of Glory, really coined the Christian context of this word Sehnsucht whenever he talked about the mingling of heaven and earth. And so this mingling can be seen in the sunset over Lake Fort Phantom that we all Instagram, right? It's this beauty that we have into this, this idea of another world that these faint pictures are coming from. It can be looking into the eyes of a lover. It can be riding on a horse in the mountains of Colorado at a summer camp. You name it. And people often brush off this beauty and are just like, oh, it's beautiful. Oh, this is nature. Oh, whatever. But the idea of Sehnsucht is that this nature, this beauty, in the Christian context of this word, is that that is heaven on earth, physically manifested on earth. And so C.S. Lewis talks about the fact that there are many fixes to this inconsolable longing, but none of them are real. We have fixes that come from hate, fixes that come from oppression, fixes that come from the desire for power. And all of these things are evil driving forces that are trying to fill this inconsolable longing. So this desire for the heaven on earth, we attempt to fulfill with sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? Is that like the 50s term? And so in The Weight of Glory, C.S. Lewis really warned about these false fixes that can be found that really do not create a heaven on earth at all. But I want to argue today that there is something that can fix inconsolable longing. There's something that can console the inconsolable. And that force is common in our world today, and it is called empathy. And so a lot of people kind of know what empathy is. They really talk about sympathy or compassion whenever they're really attempting to talk about empathy. But I want to say that sympathy is recognizing the hurt in someone else and saying, oh, that's too bad. Oh, Ebola, that is so sad. Compassion is taking a little bit further, saying, maybe I'll act on this, maybe I'll care for you, maybe I'll hold a prayer vigil for you. But empathy is really investing into the heart of the burden of our fellow human beings. It is looking into the eyes of people around us and saying, I am a human being, you are a human being, therefore nothing that you feel, nothing that you do is alien to me as a human. And a playwright named Terence from the Roman Republic said it. He said, Homo sum humani nihil ami alienum puto. And if he spoke English, he would have said, I am a human being, therefore nothing human can be alien to me. And I think that is so beautiful, because whenever we're looking at this idea of heaven on earth and this desire to eradicate this inconsolable longing that can lead to so much destruction in our own lives through different negative fixes, we have to look at the power of good in our world and what the power of good is driven by, and that is empathy. That is recognizing the humanity of our fellow brothers and sisters. And so whenever we recognize the face of God in those around us, I believe that the darkness will vanish and our eyes will have sight at that point. And that comes from a Muslim poem talking about whenever we are actually sitting at the feet of Allah, or in our case, sitting at the feet of Creator God, our eyes will have sight. And I believe that when we are dwelling at the foot of the Creator, mingling, intertwining with the created, the humans, the nature, the animals, there is heaven. Because what is heaven if it is not a sloppy kiss thrown together eternally of humans and the spiritual world? And what is heaven if it is not the essence of a joyous celebration of connectedness, of human connectedness, of spiritual connectedness, of nature connectedness? And so whenever Mother Teresa was working in Calcutta, she was working with the most vulnerable people. She was working with people who were dying, who had diseases that they could not help. And so she talked about seeking the face of God in everything, everyone, all the time, and in his hand, every happening. This is what it means to be contemplative in the heart of the world. Contemplative in the heart of the world. And that is what we as Christians are called to do today, is to look into the face of the suffering, or into the face of people who are experiencing extreme pleasure, and seeing God there, and saying, I see God in you. I see the divinity in you, and it is in me, and we are one. And so we have this eternal glory waiting for us. But I believe that this eternal glory is actually something that can easily be brought to earth. And so there are different zones of empathy that I've created in my mind, and this may be coined, but I know that I made up all these terms. But this zone of empathy that we have, 1 and 2, super easy. We are individuals, we can recognize our own humanity. We can recognize the humanity of our mother and our father, our brothers and sisters, and our very close friends. So 1 and 2, the immediate community, those are easy to reach out and give empathy to those people, to look into their eyes, recognize their humanity, and support them in human flourishing. But then you move into 3 and 4, and you're like, my community at large, what does that look like? That's Abilene, Texas. That's Texas. My self-identified nation. I'm an American. So what does it look like for me to reach out and say, my brothers and sisters in Missouri are hurting from racism, and I'm going to stand alongside them? What does it look like to reach out to our entire nation and be empathic toward them? And so those ones are all generally easy because we have things in common with them. We're all Americans. We all happen to be stuck in West Texas for the short amount of time. But 5 and 6 are something that I believe is where the magic happens, like Disney World. This is where the magic takes place. This is where the mingling of heaven and earth are truly manifested. And that's whenever we stretch our empathy from me to me and my parents, to me and my friends, to me in America. But we really say, this is me and humanity. This is me and people, billions of people that do not share an ethnicity, do not share a religion, do not share backgrounds, economic status, none of that. No one shares these things with me, but they are humans and they deserve to be treated as one. And so then you have the cycle of nature, and God put us on earth, he said, to be tenders of his garden. We are called to respect nature and the animals in it. And so whenever we are looking at the characteristics of empathy, so how do we expand our circle to include 5 and 6, to even include 3 and 4, because those are difficult. But to really look at those, you have to look at the characteristics of empathy. And so I believe that they are respect, they are compassion and tolerance, and they are this sense of never, ever, ever giving up on you sort of understanding. They're saying, you are a person. I'm not going to give up on you. I'm not going to give up on you. I'm not going to give up on what you can be, because we all have the power to be the creatures that God created us to be, which is a good creature. And so with this, I think that we need to recognize that there was also a man in history who was fully God and fully man, who was perfect and also held these characteristics. Jesus Christ had respect for people. Jesus Christ had compassion on others. Jesus had tolerance towards those who hated him. And he had this never, ever, ever, ever giving up on you feeling of understanding. And it led him to presumably die on a cross for you, even though you're really hard to understand. He said, I'm not giving up on you. And that's a characteristic of empathy. And so this means that you and I, as Christians or as believers in some sort of divinity, we have this responsibility to take on the characteristics of the leaders of that faith. And it just so happens that I can guess that most of you are Christians. And that means taking on the characteristics of Jesus. And I think that his most incredible and most revolutionary quality was empathy. And so we have that calling to take on the characteristics as well. We have the calling to be daring, to say, I have compassion for that person even no one else does. I'm going to understand you even whenever no one else wants to. And so I believe that this homesickness that we're feeling, this idea of wanting a heaven, of wanting something else that can be filled by negative fixes or positive fixes, can be cured by this idea of empathy. And so whenever we're talking about homesickness, it has no place when Jesus Christ is being manifested in our empathetic actions. This idea of heaven happening in the moment where we are intertwined with our fellow humans and nature, that is heaven. The conjoining of man and spiritual world, that is heaven. Whenever we act out of our desire to see justice brought or compassion brought to a people, we are acting in a heavenly manner. And so I wanted to say that when I finally, as a 4th grader, arrived at Disney World, man, it was magical. I remember like these huge burritos. Dad's laughing because like I really remember them well. And and I got a beret because I really wanted to be French for a while. And my parents actually bought it for me. I didn't know, and they gave it to me at Christmas. And there's a great photo of that if you want to see it sometime. But this magic, this glory, these amazing sensations that I experienced at Disney World. And man, imagine that on a bigger level. Heaven, the glory of heaven, the sensations of heaven, the sensations of being at the foot of the Creator, celebrating, dancing with the created. Man, that should give you goosebumps, you know? And so I just want to say that that amazing splendor can be found here on earth. And I encourage you to live vulnerably and with empathy and say, okay, compassion, what is that going to look like today? Empathy, what is that going to look like today? What is it going to look like on my Facebook? What is it going to look like on my Yik Yak, guys, okay? What is it going to look like for me to be an empathic creature today? And when we sit at the foot of the Creator, with the created, we are engaging in heaven and completely forgetting about Sehnsucht. We have no inconsolable longing because we are fulfilled in the idea that God is with us and that we are with man and with God. And so I hope that you guys can live fully in the presence of God.